Hi there, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's APMG webinar introducing the new Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification. My name is Mark Constable. I'll be your host and moderator, and I'm delighted to be joined by presenter Jan-Willem Middelberg. Before I introduce you properly to Jan-Willem, I'll quickly cover a bit of housekeeping for the webinar. So the first point to note is we are recording the session, and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email from us in due course once we've got the recording on slides online. That should hopefully be later today. Secondly, you have an opportunity to submit questions at any point throughout the session. So you should see an area on your control panel where you can submit questions to us. I'll be keeping an eye on those and we'll address as many as we can towards the end. And finally, we welcome any feedback on our webinars, so positive or negative. That helps us with planning and delivering webinars in the future, so that would be very much welcome. Okay, that's the housekeeping. So on to a bit about today's presenter, Jan-Willem Middelberg. Jan-Willem works with governments, corporations and individuals, helping them to advance through the use of data and automation. He's a pioneer and advocate for advancing the fields of automation and big data, regularly speaking at universities and technology conferences around the world. And he's the author of two frameworks, a service automation framework and the Enterprise Big Data framework, the second being particularly relevant to today's session. Jan-Willem holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering, a master's in supply chain management, and is currently pursuing a second master's degree in computer and information technology. So I've no doubt you're in good hands for today's session. And at this point, I'll hand you over to Jan-Willem to get started. So welcome, Jan-Willem, and over to you.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks again for the very kind introduction for today. I'm very happy to be here today and present the first preview of the content of the Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification, which will launch in November 1st in just a couple of days. Before I get started and tell you all about the wonderful world of big data analysis, let me give you a brief overview of the webinar today and all the different topics that we're going to cover in this next 30 minutes. I will start today's webinar to discuss a little bit about the role of the Enterprise Big Data Analyst and what is this job description in the organization, and especially how big data analysis came to light in especially recent years. We will then move on to discuss some of the fundamentals of the big data analysis process, which is the process of executing big data projects and analyzing them on a day-to-day basis. That's a part of the introduction for today. Then I will start with going into detail about the new certification that is coming out, and especially give you a highlight of some of the key concepts that will be covered in this course. As you might be familiar with big data a little bit already, you will know that this is a very, very broad field. So what we really try to do in this new scheme is to narrow down the content and present some of the most relevant topics that are required for any enterprise big data analyst today. So things that we will be looking at are data cleaning and data wrangling techniques. What are they and how are they used? And then I will also provide a brief overview of some of the essential model building techniques and concepts. At the end of this webinar, I will also introduce the new certification that will be published by APMG very shortly and provide you with some overview and details of the new exam that will be launched. So let's get started with today's content. Before we begin to explain the Enterprise Big Data Analyst guide and certification and key learning concepts, let's take one step back and review what was published in the original Big Data framework. In the Enterprise Big Data professional level, which was launched around a year ago, we introduced key concept and capability model for big data. Basically, what this model does is that it explains the core capabilities that every organization needs to have that wants to start building big data capability over time. In the first guide, the model that you see here on the screen was introduced. In essence, in order to become successful with big data, there are 6 core capabilities that organizations need to start building. It all starts with defining a big data strategy, because without knowing where you are and knowing where you're going, it's very hard to make the right types of investments. As you know, big data is really an area that has a lot of potential things to analyze. The world of data is so tremendously large that you can get lost very easily. So what are good things to analyze and how can they deliver a return on investment? Those are the topics that are covered in strategy. Then we moved on toward big data architecture, which really explains the technological and IT infrastructure challenges that come with big data. Big data is so tremendously large that you will need to have a distinct IT infrastructure to manage that. And that is the capability that's being discussed into big data architecture. The next topic, in order to retrieve value from the data, is that we discussed big data algorithms. And what we will see in this new level is that we will build significantly on the knowledge that was covered in the big data algorithm section. Next, we discuss processes and functions. Processes describe the elements that are required for any enterprise organization that deals with data. Here you can think about data privacy, rules and regulations, but also data management. How do you keep track of the quality of your data in order to ensure that the results that you publish and research are actually valid? Those are all covered by processes. Next, there's the people aspect, and that is completely covered in big data functions. Within big data functions, we discuss how to set up a big data center of excellence and what are the first steps that an organization needs to make in order to get started with big data. The last topic, which you see on the outer ring of the big data framework, is artificial intelligence. And we explained in this first certification how artificial intelligence builds upon existing big data practices in order to ensure that you can incorporate cognitive analytics within your existing big data organization. So that's a bit of a recap and good to know before we get started on this particular webinar, because it also puts the new certification in perspective. Last year, the Enterprise Big Data Professional level was launched, which is the guide which you see at the right-hand side. And that guide has now been downloaded over 2,500 times all across the globe. And many organizations are starting to implement big data based upon this certification. The level that I'm going to discuss with you today is called the Enterprise Big Data Analyst level, which is the second level after professional. The Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification is completely tailored towards the role of the Big Data Analyst. So this is the person within the organization that really analyzes data on a day-to-day basis. So what we've taken great care to do is to explain what are the fundamental steps, what are the fundamental processes and technologies that you need to have, but also what are the most common algorithms that a big data analyst can use in his or her work. So that's what is going to be the scope of this webinar today. Here we're going to look at what are the things that are covered in the big data analyst lifecycle. So let's start with a quick question first. What is big data analysis? Data analysis is not something new. Data analysis has been around for almost the entire human mankind. However, what is new today is that data analysis has really evolved into much more of an art and a science. And it's basically the statistician John Tukey who first introduced the concept of big data as a process. The analysis of data, he says, is procedures for analyzing data, techniques for interpreting it, and producing results of such procedures. That is exactly what we will focus on in this guide and in this certification. What are the procedures? What are the techniques in order to analyze data in a structured and coherent fashion? Of course, we've come a long way since 1962, but most of the words that he discussed are as relevant today as they were earlier. The only thing that, of course, has changed is the volume and size of data. Every day, with every click, swipe, or push of a button that we make on our smartphones or on the internet, we're generating data. And we're literally talking about terabytes of data every single day. So what we developed is what is the process, what is the best way to analyze that data over time, module by module. So within this particular certification, we will look at the data analysis process. And you see a very brief summary on the slide here below. The process of data analysis moves all the way from defining a business objective towards data ingestion, preparation, analysis, and finally communicating the results towards different stakeholders in the enterprise. It's this process-oriented nature of data analysis that is fully covered in this new certification, and we will dive into way more detail here. If we zoom in a little bit further on the data analysis process, we see that this process can be narrowed down into a number of different aspects. And basically what you see in this screen is sort of a table of contents of the new guide. On the left-hand side, you see corporate objectives, the things that enterprises want to achieve out of big data. And that is very much aligned with the strategy section that I mentioned earlier. For an organization, it's tremendously important to know where they're going and how they can retrieve value out of the data. Potentially, you can analyze everything in the world, but it's very hard to focus your search and really focus on the things that make a competitive advantage for your organization. And that's exactly what we will discuss in the business objectives chapter. We will look at different objectives, whether they're descriptive, inferential, or things like predictive or mechanistic, and we will couple them to different techniques that can be used on a day-to-day basis. Then we move in towards the data pipeline, which you see in the middle, and that basically consists of 3 phases. What we will first cover in the guide is how do you ingest data into systems. Data is nowadays stored almost everywhere. Most enterprises still have a lot of local data, which they have generated by themselves over time, which resides in databases or in different systems in the organization. But that's of course not all the data out there. Most of the value today in big data is generated from outside systems, from unstructured data, things like video files, pictures, or audio, or think of data that is generated through social media. All of that data needs to be aggregated into the same system so that it can be properly analyzed. Within the ingestion phase of the big data analysis guide, we will look at different techniques to import local data sets, online data sets, and databases, so that you can have a very good overview of what are the different data sources that are out there, and in order to start making your models. The second phase will then focus more towards the preparation of data, because the validity of the results falls or stands with the validity of the data that is being analyzed. Most data sets today contain at least a significant amount of corrupt or missing values that have been built up over the years. So we need to dive into different techniques that are necessary to either clean the data, getting rid of corrupt values, or putting it into such a format that it can be analyzed properly in conjunction with other data sets. And that is the process of data wrangling. So in the data preparation phase, we focus on the core elements and techniques that are necessary to prepare your data for analysis itself. This way, you can make sure that the data that is being analyzed will deliver the results that are required. The next section, and this is the major section of the new guide, will focus on analysis techniques. And what we'll do in this new guide is introduce the most common statistical algorithms and also machine learning algorithms that are required within big data analysis. So here we will really dive into things like inference, regression, classification and clustering, and how do you do outlier detection. So for each of these different components, we will present a number of algorithms that people can use. Last but not least, we will also discuss the ways in which you can communicate the results of your data analysis, and whether this will be in dashboards or PDF reports or things that you can download. That really doesn't matter. What matters is that you are able to present the outcomes of your analysis in a structured way so that it also contains not only the graphs, but also the way that you arrive at those particular results. And that is especially covered in the last section of the new guidance. All of these elements are, of course, surrounded by things like security, governance, and ethics. And especially in today's day and age, things like data privacy and security become more and more prevalent within any organization. So that's also an aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. So what is the end result of this particular process? On the previous slide, I showed you a very high-level overview of the central model and table of contents that will be discussed in this new certification. Basically, what we did in composing this new certification is that we talked with experts in the field and came up with a list of data analysis techniques that almost everyone working in big data analysis should know. So core objectives, as I mentioned on the previous slide, are things like defining business objectives, data ingestion, preparation, analysis, and preparation. Very similar to the figure that we saw previously. What we've also done, and this is new compared to the previous certification, is that we have illustrated each of these examples and algorithms with working examples. So throughout the new guide, you will find references to public and open data sets, and we've chosen to work with the R programming language and the R editor in order to showcase many of these things. So what you will learn in this new course is not only what the theory is behind these algorithms, but you will also apply them in real life. And this is also what we will test during the examination. We will not only test whether you know the knowledge and the fundamental theory about big data analysis, but also whether you're able to apply that theory towards existing data sets. So this is quite a different approach from the approach that we've taken in the previous certification. It also means that for the examination, we've chosen for a practitioner style certification so that we really test whether people are able to apply the theory into a real life situation. So let's run through some of the main things that you will learn in Enterprise Big Data Analysis. First of all, we will talk about data ingestion, which is collecting data from different sources, different data sources, collecting the raw data, as you might say. Most of that data that is currently being analyzed and is present in business intelligence solutions is captured in data warehouses. So that's the internal data. Here we learn to connect to databases and analyze localized files such as CSV, Excel, and text files that are produced by sensors. However, we also spend a significant amount of time by explaining how you can download data from the internet, whether it's through APIs or through downloading files directly from websites. This is really where the value of big data comes to play. If you're able to combine your regular enterprise data with unstructured data that is present on the internet, you can really come towards new insights. So that's what we will cover in the first section. How do you import data from data sources that are freely available in the world? Next, we move on towards the janitor's job of data science, as it's sometimes called. And here we will focus on two things. First of all, we will focus on what are existing data cleaning techniques. And in this case, here we focus on getting rid of corrupt data or of missing data or duplicate entries that make the data not fit for analysis. So here we will look at automated techniques for data cleaning. And that is the process of detecting and correcting corrupt, inaccurate records from a data set. Besides data cleaning, we will also focus on data wrangling. And data wrangling, which is sometimes referred to as data munging, is altering the data into such a structure that it can be more easily read by big data solutions. So here we will really present the data in such a way that the analysis becomes easier and easier over time. So that's the topics that are covered in the data preparation module. We will then dive into the main module, and that is how do you build data analysis models. So in order to analyze data and really retrieve value from the data, algorithms need to be built in order to crunch these numbers. And they retrieve the true value out of the data. And of course, there's a number of different techniques based upon the business objectives that you have. And there's a variety of different elements out there that you can use in terms of existing algorithms. Very frequent algorithms that are used for explanatory data analysis, things like regression, inference, classification, clustering, or outlier detection. So In line with the previous guides and the things that we discussed in the algorithm section of the Enterprise Big Data Professional, we will now take one step and one level deeper and explain what are the core algorithms that make this up. And not only that, we will look not to the differences between those algorithms, and also what is the difference in accuracy if you use one particular algorithm over another. It sometimes goes a bit more into technical detail, but remember, a small change in percentage can make up for millions and millions of dollars. What we will really do in this algorithm section is cover what we call beyond the basics. So we will not only explain some of the most common algorithms that are out there, but we will also analyze them on a more in-depth level. So for instance, if we look at classification algorithms, in this next guide, we will discuss things like the k-nearest neighbor classifier, naive Bayes, logistic regression, and classification trees. All four of these are classification algorithms, but it's up to the data analyst to select the appropriate algorithm given the input data and given the business outcomes that he or she wants to achieve. So not only do you need a fundamental understanding of how each of these algorithms work, you will also need to apply these towards sample data to test the accuracy of models. And I think this is really where the analyst level goes one level deeper than most other certifications. Similar things will be done in terms of clustering or outlier detection. Within clustering, we will talk about hierarchical clustering and k-means as algorithms, and in outlier detection algorithms, we will cover the grubs and k and outlier detection models. We don't have the time, unfortunately, today to dive into each one of these in detail, but on the right-hand side of this slide, you see some of the results that can be produced with these kinds of graphs. And that is exactly what we will do in the course. We will explain the algorithm itself and then run some of these tests on sample data, so that as a delegate, you will learn how to produce the graphs on the right. Finally, towards the end of the course, we will also discuss visualization techniques. And all the pictures that you see here on the slide are actually visualizations that we will produce with the R software that we use during this particular course. So in this course, you will learn to make all these kinds of graphs in order to visualize the data that you've just queried and analyzed and present that in a structured fashion so that it becomes understandable for management. So here on the left-hand side, you see things like scatter plots and box plots. And on the right-hand side, you see how correlation can be used and different box plots can be evaluated. So visualization is a very important topic in order to convey the main message of the data analysis itself. So as I mentioned before, all of these different techniques that we will cover, including all the algorithms, will be illustrated with different examples. And what we try to do in this certification is really look for online open data sets, and with that we mean big data sets that we can use in order to achieve those results. So some of the practical examples that you will learn is if you have a data set of 500,000 bottles of wine and you know their ingredients, are you able to build a predictive model that can guess the quality or can estimate the quality of the wine based upon the ingredients that are in there? Another fun case study that we will look at is how you can set up different customer profiles from 100,000 telco customers. So what we will do there is that we will look for similarities between the different customers and group them accordingly into clusters, so that each data set or each customer is automatically assigned a label of a particular customer itself. These customer profiles and the techniques that you will learn here can be applied to any customer case. So as soon as you've built the original model, you can use that to the different customer sets within your own organization. Other fun things that we will look at is if you download the data from house listing websites online, are you able, based upon the characteristics of square acreage and footage and the number of rooms, are you able to detect which houses have been priced above the market and which houses have been priced below the market? So I think these are really fun and interesting examples that you will really learn how to apply the techniques of enterprise big data analysis in the real world. So we really try to make this guide as practical as possible so it really becomes a practitioner certification. So as you can hear from me, I'm very excited to launch this new certification this week. And we're very proud to introduce the new Enterprise Big Data Analyst Guide. Very similar to the Enterprise Big Data Professional certification that we launched last year, the new guide will be available as a free download from the website. So the guide is available for download absolutely free. It's around 200 pages, so it's not a read that you will complete in 15 minutes, but it's very comprehensive, and it also contains all of the examples that I mentioned about earlier. So how do you get access to it? Here is a bit of a timeline and indication for the certifications and all the information that will follow from this webinar itself. The new Enterprise Big Data official guide will be presented on the 1st of November, which is in 2 days during the launch event in Kuala Lumpur, where I'm located. Very soon after that, within a couple of hours, it will be made available as soon as possible as a free download on the website. In case, based upon this webinar, you're interested to already receive a digital copy by email, you can sign up and pre-register for the digital download on the link that you see on the screen in front of you. So you need to go to bigdataframework.org and then go to /next-level-guide Enterprise Big Data Analyst. If you put this into Google, you will also find the page. The APMG Enterprise Big Data Analyst exam and certification will be available shortly afterwards. We're in the phase of reviewing the exam questions, and APMG will communicate the exact launch date fairly soon afterwards. The training and accreditation will also be available soon through the accredited training community, which can be found at apmginternational.com. So here's a bit of an overview of the timelines. Let's move on to discuss what will be required from the Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification, because we saw that a lot of people who registered for this webinar have already taken the professional certification. As I mentioned before, the EBDA Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification is really a practitioner-oriented certification. So we really wanted to test whether people are able and capable to apply the algorithms and the knowledge that they will have to real case situations. So for that reason, we've chosen to go for a completely case study-based exam. It's a bit of a lengthy exam, 2.5 hours, but it's practitioner style. So you will need to read a lot and interpret some of the different facts that are presented throughout the case study. The exam will be composed of 4 main questions, each of which has been subdivided with 20 marks per question. Some of the marks will have at least 1 answer correct, but some of the other questions will have 2 or more answers correct. You will need to have a 50% pass mark on the examination in order to pass. Upon passing the examination, you will receive the traditional APMG certification, as well as the digital badge, which you see on the right-hand side, and which you can share online to share your success. These badges have been very successful so far, and many people online have already shared their Big Data Professional certification badge. These badges can be put on social media or be included into digital CVs. So I hope this webinar will give you a good and brief introduction of some of the key things that you can expect in the new Enterprise Big Data Analyst certification. I saw a lot of questions come in during the webinar, but unfortunately everybody's on mute. So I'd like now to invite Mark back to moderate some of the questions and see if we can provide some answers.
Yeah, Willem, thanks very much for that. We've got a few questions. First one is around eligibility and prerequisites. So if somebody that wants to do the exam, are there any prerequisites before they sit the exam?
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, in this case, there are. As I tried to explain during the webinar, this certification really builds upon the theory that was covered in the Enterprise Big Data Professional certification. So the EBDP, or Enterprise Big Data Professional certification, is a prerequisite in order to sit this exam. So you will not get your exam grades unless you've uploaded your certificate for Enterprise Big Data Professional.
Okay, thanks, Emil. And a related question, do you have to undergo training, accredited training, or is it available to self-study?
It's not available for self-study, so yes, the answer to that question would be you would need to sit with an accredited training provider in order to undergo the Enterprise Big Data Analyst training course. I would also like to add here that you will probably need it because all of the examples and data sets that we're going to discuss will be illustrated in class. So it's really a how-to guide, and we will illustrate how do you get the results out of all of those data sets by running queries in the classroom. It's really difficult to do that, to study that from a book and paper without doing it and seeing actually how this needs to be done. So besides the fact that it's mandatory, I also highly recommend that you take a training course to proceed with this.
Okay, thanks, Emil. A couple of questions about the guide. First one is where can you download the free guide? I think you did mention that earlier, but it might be worth reiterating that. And also, is it available in print format, or is it just an online guide?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The guide will be available from November 1st, which is the official launch date. It will be available from the bigdataframework.org website, which is the official website of the Big Data Framework. And it will be available both as an online digital PDF, but for the people who prefer the more conventional manner of paper, you can then just obviously print it.
Okay, thanks, Emil. This one's about the target audience. So, what type of roles do you see as the primary target audience for the course and certification?
Well, what you really see is that most organizations today already have departments where they have data analysts. Those are the people that analyze data and build models on a day-to-day basis. So what we've seen in recent years is that they are tasked now with analyzing more and more data. So those departments are either expanding or they're being transferred towards big data or business intelligence units. So this certification is mostly aimed for people who are working with data on a day-to-day basis or who have an aspiration to start working in that particular field. Because I do think that this certification really provides you with the essential know-how to start working as a data analyst almost instantly.
Okay, yeah, one final question. Is the training aligned to a particular vendor?
That's a good question. The answer to that is no. I mentioned during the webinar that we will use R as a programming language during this course. And that's what we selected because R is also an open source programming language and it's available for free. And we did think that it's very important to illustrate all of the examples with real life situations. So we deliberately chose not to go with any proprietary software vendors because then there's a lock-in effect and we wanted to keep the big data framework as open as possible. So even though some of the scripts that you will see and the algorithms will be shown through the R programming language, it is a vendor independent certification and the techniques that you will learn in the certification can be applied in almost any commercial software program.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I think that's all the questions we have. So we'll start to wrap up there. I think we've got a further information slide, haven't we, with some useful links.
Yes.
Yes, there we go. So we'll leave that on as we close. So to close, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I do hope you found it useful and informative today. And many thanks to you, Jan Willem, for your insight and expertise today. Very much appreciated. Yeah, we'll leave this slide on for a bit if you want to check out those links. But we will also cover these in the follow-up email as well. So don't worry if you don't have time to jot the links down. So thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we hope to see you on future APMG webinars. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Mark.